there have been some issues that you have been passionate about. To see your coverage of Street Reach,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
Elizabeth
yeah.
Chapin Patterson,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
the Community Assistance Center
Absolutely.
there.
Absolutely.
To see how many times you've been there and to hear about the experiences of you and family members and otherwise showing up there,
Sure.
even to help out in the kitchen on
yeah.
a regular basis, has
Yeah.
really been something,
Sure.
a passion of yours.
Yeah, well, but you can do that here. You see, that's the thing. You work for the networks. You go in there, let's say to the White House at 8 o'clock in the morning, well, sometimes before. And you don't get out of there until they put what's called put the lid on, which usually was around 6:30 or 7 at night.
Boy, Steve.
And you did that 5 days a week, and sometimes you did a piece. Of course, I had to do radio every hour, but then again, I'd do a television piece for the morning sunrise, which is the half hour before the Today Show.
Right.
And I'd walk out of there, head for the parking lot, and think, well, I really had a great day today. Everything worked out just fine. But I'd never know because there wasn't any kind of feedback from anybody.
Right.
Every once in a while, I'd get a card from somebody who was either criticizing me or complimenting me. But that would be few and far between. Even though these reports were going all over the world,
Right.
you just never knew. And that included even on the radio network. I come down here to this little burg and get on the radio, and man, you can't say 2 words without the phone ringing.
I love it,
And
Steve.
without being a part of the community.
Right,
You know,
right.
and the community accepting you and asking you to be a part of a lot of what goes on around here.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen at the networks.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
So I like this better than that.
That's great. Good for you, Steve. That's right. You
Okay.
wouldn't have been judging pageants
No,
up there.
that's right.
You wouldn't have
That's
been
right.
working in a soup kitchen
That's exactly
up
right.
there.
That's
and
right. That's
at the
right.
same time, that in that environment, you wouldn't have been able to have had as active a family life as you've been able to have down here. I know that.
Oh, well, that's true. Yeah,
that-
I was away a lot from my family, but it was not intolerable.
Right.
You know, and one of the reasons is that because of the union, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, when you work really hard, a lot of days in a row with no time off, you were then given, the company had to give you the time off.
Right.
So
right.
I could actually go home and paint my house for 2 weeks if I wanted to.
Yeah, great.
I'd never been off 2 weeks since I've been down here. I think
right,
the longest
that's right.
I've ever
Yes,
taken is a week.
yes.
So it's a difference, but it works.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So
You've been able to spend some time heading back to New York, heading back to Philadelphia for some of the reunions.
Yeah, I went to both the WCBS and KYW reunions because they were both pioneers of all news radio, and I was the first anchor on both of them.
Right.
But we also have, we call ourselves the board of directors, and that's Ed Silverman and Charles Osgood and Lou Adler and a bunch of us who meet every 6 months in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Is that right?
For an Italian lunch and just yak and take our families if we can. And we get caught up on everything. And then Bob Gibson, who used to be with ABC News, is kind of the guiding hand, what can I say, the gossip guru, because he's on the net all the time telling us who's had children, who's had grandchildren, and who's died. In fact, today he sent Ed Silverman's memories of Jimmy Breslin, who used to be a big writer in New York.
Right.
And so we got a little bit of Jimmy Breslin on today's message. But it's like there's a club.
I love it.
We've known each other for all these years, and a lot of them are in Florida.
Right.
But we see each other, and of course Teaneck gives us that chance to physically see each other
Yes.
twice a year.
I'd love to know if a reporter would ever show up at something. I mean, that's a great reunion to have somebody there.
We don't
to-
want that. We don't want that.
There are things that should stay.
Yeah, just leave it alone, you know?
Yeah.
Definitely.
You know, Steve, there's so many, and of course I wanted to pull off some of those snippets. We're
Yeah.
about out of time. If there was any, I guess, is it difficult? You know, we interviewed a minister recently and asked him, is there a favorite book in the Bible? And he said there was, in a verse. Is there a story during your, let's say, the 20 years with NBC News or the 10 years as a
Yeah.
White House correspondent that really sticks out?
Yeah, that was when I was with Baker, and we went to Jordan for of course, he always had meetings, and then once in a while we'd actually have a news conference. And they had scheduled a news conference with him and King Hussein at the palace. And we got in our little van, it was like an 8-person van, and we're headed to that particular event. And I was taking pictures out of the window of the little bus. All of a sudden, sirens, we get pulled over by the Jordanian gendarmes. They come on the bus, you know, we didn't know what was going on, and they come back and they point at me, you, out.
No.
Yeah, so they took me out and put me in the wagon they had there, took me to jail.
Oh, come on.
I'm not kidding you. The cell was about the size of this table. I mean, you couldn't sit down in it hardly. You know? And I didn't know what it was all about. And I'm thinking, and I could hear my compatriots out in the bus screaming and yelling, let Porter go, and if you don't, the king's not getting his news conference, you know. Shit, it was crazy. So finally somebody from the embassy showed up, because we didn't even we normally had somebody on the bus with us from the embassy, but he shows up and he said, Steve, the problem is you were trying to take cameras and take pictures in what they consider to be a sensitive area.
Wow.
Which I thought was hilarious, because Israel probably has a picture of every square inch
everything.
of
Yeah,
Jordan.
yeah.
So they asked me for my camera, and I said, all right, here it is. And I opened it up and I pulled the film out and I handed them the camera. And so they weren't happy with that, but they let me go. We went to the news conference. We got back in the van and we started driving for what we thought was the airport.
Right.
Okay, so we're going and we're going and we're going. None of us knew the airport, where it was. And all of a sudden we're up on a ridge looking down to this huge expanse and a river in the distance. And the motorcade pulls over. Jim Baker gets out of his limousine and comes back, sticks his head in the window, and he says, folks, we're not going to the airport. Okay, Mr. Secretary, where are we going? We're going to Israel. You got to be kidding. You can't go to Israel. Remember, back in those days, you had to go around through Egypt.
Right.
Or some other place. No, we're going to Israel. How are we getting there? We're going to drive. You got to be kidding. No, he says, and besides, you see this road? This road was built by AID money. That's our kind of our secret stash that we do to help people. Right. So we went winding our way down there. We picked up a military escort, which took us through a minefield, and you could see where things had blown up. And we got over to the old George Allenby Bridge. Now, anybody that knows the Ottoman Empire and that history knows George Allenby. It was an old wooden bridge. They dropped us off there, and we were going to walk across that bridge to be the first direct walk back and forth between Jordan and Israel. That was a new agreement.
Right.
And that was why we were in Amman at the time. We didn't know it.
Right.
So we start across that bridge with the secretary, and this is all a very solemn event. And all of a sudden, there was a bunch of camera guys that had already shown up at the other side from Israel. Wait a minute. Where camera doesn't work, something happened. Can you go back and do it again?
No, Steve.
I kid you not. We had to turn around in this very historic event and turn around, walk back, turn around. Okay, come on.
So Secretary of State James Baker.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we started walking across. Of course, everybody's laughing by that time.
Yeah.
And we got across. But that is one of those things where you knew a huge amount of history was being made.
Yeah.
And today, we're looking at something very ominous in that part of the world.
Right.
And in fact, right there, near that, is Ramada. And as you know, the Palestinian president here recently ordered his people to resign. And the king over there in Jordan, Abdullah, who is King Hussein's son, he's just ordered his government to quit. Right. And they're going to reassign. Mm-hmm. And I look back to that day and what happened on that day and how much of a key it was to relationships between Israel and their Arab neighbors. That was just one of them.
Yes. Golly, Steve, that's amazing. I've got to ask, I've been wanting to ask this, if you had never become an anchor, a reporter, had the desire to be on the behind the scenes, what do you think you would have done if you hadn't gotten behind the mic or behind the camera?
If I had had my druthers, I'd have had a television camera in my hand, and I'd have been out there being it. Because those guys, they have a lot of fun, and besides that, they made better money than we did.
Great words.
Okay.
I'm sorry we've run out of time, Steve.
That's okay.
Stay tuned to a little more All-American People with Steve Porter coming up next. You know, we ran out of time. We couldn't get into Steve anchoring for 48 hours straight, the inauguration of Ronald Reagan, the resignation of Richard M. Nixon back in '74. Think about that. 48 hours straight or going all night long for one particular event. It's that opportunity for Steve to have been a part of reporting events going on throughout the world. That column title of Porter's Point, snippets can tell a lot, though I prefer to share the whole story. It's a special one. If you've sat here the last 45 minutes, hopefully you feel you've gotten a piece of the whole story. Steve Porter, thanks again for being with us.
Okay, yeah, glad to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.